Attorney General Merrick Garland put the ball squarely in Donald Trump's court today during a surprise news conference, announcing he's made a motion to unseal the search warrant and property receipt for the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago. So now it will likely be up to the former president as to whether the warrant is seen by the public. And the court informing the Department of Justice that by tomorrow afternoon, the judge wants to know whether Trump objects. And ABC News reporting tonight that he is seriously considering objecting to the release of the material. And also, just breaking in the last hour, new reporting from the Washington Post that the Department of Justice is looking for classified documents relating to nuclear weapons, which would certainly underscore the DOJ's deep concern about the documents being held in a location where they could be susceptible to being obtained by bad actors. This latest news is one of several crucial pieces of new information today, which did not actually come from the Attorney General's news conference. There was also reporting from numerous outlets that a subpoena had been issued to Trump earlier this year, seeking documents that federal investigators believed the former president had failed to turn over. And that is crucial, because it suggests that the DOJ tried to obtain this information by other means and hadn't been able to get it. But before we get to all of that, the Attorney General's news conference in Washington this afternoon, Garland's remarks lasted only 4 minutes, and this was the key point.
First, I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly.
The Attorney General there debunking a report from Newsweek that he somehow didn't oversee and sign off on the raid, something both my guest and I last night said we found hard to believe. And amid talk from Trump's allies and attorneys that he wasn't furnished with a copy of the search warrant, Attorney General Garland put the onus completely on the former president and said it was his words that led to this decision.
The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
Now, Garland indirectly addressed the fact that this was not the first effort to get these documents from the former president. With the reports about a subpoena having previously been issued for the documents, this comment took on far more meaning.
Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken.
That may sound academic, but that also may be the single most important thing Merrick Garland said today. Because now you're not just talking about a record-keeping investigation. It would sure seem the DOJ is alleging that the former president had intentionally avoided turning over highly classified documents, despite numerous requests, maybe even hiding them. And that would be an entirely different issue from just record keeping. In particular, if these did relate to nuclear secrets. The New York Times reported that the documents investigators think were at Mar-a-Lago were so sensitive the DOJ felt they had no choice but to pursue more aggressive tactics. Now, the former president is disputing that. In a statement, Trump wrote, quote, "My attorneys and representatives were cooperating fully, and very good relationships had been established. The government could have had whatever they wanted if we had it. They asked us to put an additional lock on a certain area, done. Everything was fine. Better than that of most previous presidents, and then out of nowhere, and with no warning, Mar-a-Lago was raided at 6:30 in the morning by a very large number of agents and even safecrackers." Now, look, searches are often done without warning. But this does still leave us with a few major questions tonight. One, what exactly did the DOJ do to try to get these documents? What conversations were had? What exactly was subpoenaed? What are they saying they didn't get? Number two, was it clear exactly what they were asking for? And did Trump or his team lie or intentionally try to deceive the FBI? And three, what exactly is in those documents? If it was related to nuclear secrets, obviously that would be a game changer. Now, here's the reality. The straight talk without the partisanship you may see elsewhere. I don't think even the release of the search warrant and the property receipt is going to shed much light on this. What we will learn from the warrant, most importantly, if it's made public, is which crimes the Justice Department was investigating. But broadly, what's the crime? It will get into specifics about the premises, like where, and it'll offer some details about what types of information federal investigators are allowed to remove. But the search warrant and property receipt are not likely to spell out what specific documents the FBI removed from the premises or their specific need to go in now. It's more likely going to say things like 5 boxes from here, 2 file folders from there. The property receipt won't get into any type of detail about the documents themselves, which will likely be redacted. So, while Merrick Garland won't tell us exactly what is going on, we have many more significant clues tonight. And to help us sort through exactly what this means, we're joined again by Jay Town, a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama. He was appointed by former President Trump. And Michael J. Moore, the former U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Georgia, an appointee of former President Obama, but who's been very cautious in warning the left-leaning media not to jump to conclusions. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. All right, Jay, look, my head is spinning on how much breaking news there's been in the last hour or two, totally separate from the press conference that Merrick Garland had. But let me just get your first reaction to all of the news, including the Attorney General's press conference.
To all of the news, right, Dan? I mean, it just it's every 15 minutes there is a sort of a new thing to grapple with that is immense and tremendous. I will say about General Garland's press conference, I did think it was impressive. I also liked his defense of the Bureau, of the FBI, and you know, they're good people in the FBI, and some of the things, I know we'll talk about it later, but some of the things that have happened even today in Cincinnati are appalling. I'll say this. He answered a lot of questions that I've had since the search warrant, like who approved this, who knew about this ahead of time, you know, what were sort of the, not the actual items that they were looking for, but that there was predication to believe that there was criminal activity afoot, which is, you know, obviously important for every search warrant. And I'll say this, one of the more important things that he said that I at least believe that I caught to was more information will be made available at the appropriate time. And then in a filing today, the Justice Department lawyer said the public's clear and powerful interest in understanding what occurred under these circumstances weighs heavily in favor of unsealing. So he signaled to the entire country, DOJ's not afraid of this warrant. They're not afraid for the whole world to see it. And as you said in the lead-in, really put the ball in former President Trump's court.
You know, Michael, that they may not be afraid of it. They may be ready to embrace it. But I guess I didn't feel like I learned as much as Jay did from the press conference. Yeah, you know, I feel like I learned a lot more from the reporting outside of the press conference than I did from the press conference itself, which I don't know that really told us anything apart from the fact that Merrick Garland is saying he's the one who approved it, which you and I both were very skeptical of the Newsweek reporter who was on with us last night saying, no, he didn't sign off on it. We're both like, how could that be? Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Michael Moore.
Well, I'm glad to be with both of you, and I agree in a lot of respects to what's been said. Let me just kind of, for the viewers, let me remind you, we're not talking about documents that will be like an incident report or a crash report or a wreck report that will have details about what happened. What the Attorney General is suggesting and has moved the court to open is a copy of a very basic form that will have some information about you can go to this address and you can search these premises during this time. And another document, the receipt, or we call the search warrant return, which will just have, like you say, just very basic information, because the documents, if they are in fact are classified, they're not going to tell you what documents are on it. You're just going to get some generic vanilla description. The tail will be in the search warrant affidavit. And it's a pretty smooth move by Garland to throw it back to Trump and say, look, we're willing to let these 2 documents go. The problem is, for the president's team, is that soils him and soils the case without really getting to the meat of what's there, and that is what's in this affidavit. Why do they think it's there? How many times have they tried to get the information? Who's telling them where the safe is? Who's telling them what documents are there? Who's the confidential source? Those things that will need to come out. So Garland's offering to open up sort of one eye to the case. I suggest, and if I was Trump advising the former president, which I would not do, I would say, look, you want to make it public? Let's make it all public. Let's go ahead now, and we'll agree.
And Jay, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the position that the former president takes, which is to say we are going to object because they will say only the search warrant and the receipt is coming out and not the underlying affidavit. What do you make of that?
I think that will be the strategy you see by 3 p.m. Eastern time. You got to love Michael Moore's style. He tells it like it is. I love that about him. I agree with you, Dan. I think that they will have slight objections, but under these conditions, if they'll, and it'll all be cloaked under sort of fairness. And look, the president deserves fairness here, right? He has a presumption of innocence, and he doesn't need things coming out that might somehow sully a jury.
And let's be clear, he hasn't been charged with anything, right? We don't even know if he's going to get charged with anything. I mean, it may just be that they wanted to get back the documents, right? And they thought the documents were so important, they may say we needed them back, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily going to charge him with a crime. But I do think, Michael Moore, in the end, that sort of stunningly, Trump's team is going to object to the release of the search warrant.
Yeah, and the reality is it's going to be a political calculation and have nothing to do with the law. It's not going to be any legal basis one way or another. It's just going to be, we don't want it to come out because it dirties me up before I'm even charged. That's a lot of the reason that you have these secrecy provisions about the grand jury process. That's why the DOJ doesn't make public comments typically about investigations, because if somebody's not charged, you don't want to sort of hang the mantle of criminal over them unless there actually is a criminal charge that's brought against them. So I think they'll say, we object to this, we don't want it to come out. But again, the detail and what we want to see is in that search warrant affidavit. And that makes a big difference. I mean, if in fact it's about nuclear information and there have been efforts to hide that and it might be disclosed, that's something that changes the ballgame.
Yep.
If it's documents about maybe defense contractors or something and somebody has scratched out the classification code at the top and, there's some questionable things to it where they may have still been about nuclear topics in general, that's a different thing.
Yep.
And so it's really about the nature of the documents, and it's about, what efforts did he make to keep them, and were there discussions going on about getting them if in fact the National Archives.
And I think Michael Moore, again, offering that necessary restraint that is important in situations like this, because even when, and I'm reading, from the Washington Post story, that even if there were, quote unquote, related to nuclear weapons, relating to nuclear weapons, still don't know exactly what that means. So we got to be careful here. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.